Also available from Sky River Films. From the tip of the southeast panhandle to the frozen Arctic tundra, from the heartland of Alaska's sweeping interior to its stormy western coast, this is Alaska as you've never seen it before. Discovering Alaska is an award-winning 75-minute video filled with beauty, wildlife, history, and adventure. Discovering Alaska from Sky River Films. Wild Alaska is a magnificent visual portrait of wildlife on the last frontier. Shot in some of the most remote regions of Alaska, this program takes you in close into areas rarely known or visited. Award-winning cinematography, breathtaking in scope and beauty, captures the grand scale of Alaska's wilderness and the animal life within it. Wild Alaska from Sky River Films. Traveling the Inside Passage takes you on an unforgettable journey along Alaska's southeast panhandle. From the majestic forests to the ancient glacial ice fields, this is a place filled with beauty, wildlife, and excitement. Traveling the Inside Passage from Alaska's premier producers, Sky River Films. Myth, legend, science, Aurora. Aurora, rivers of light in the sky. Aurora from Sky River Films. To order any of these videos or to receive a free brochure of all our programs, call toll-free 1-800-248-WILD or write to Sky River Films, 3710 Woodland Drive, Suite 2100, Anchorage, Alaska, 99517. And now for our feature presentation.
Welcome to the Alaska Highway, one of the great road adventures of North America. We're about to travel over 1,520 miles through some of the most beautiful and rugged terrain on the continent. Here is a pristine land, a vast and spacious country filled with towering snow-capped peaks, wild, winding, turbulent rivers, and breathtaking vistas you can witness from your car window. Come with us now on an unforgettable journey from Dawson Creek, British Columbia, through the Yukon Territory into Alaska. Learn a little of the history of the road, how it was made, and what it means to Canadians and Alaskans today. See the art and culture of Native Americans and the fingerprints of the wild and woolly Klondike Gold Rush. We'll tell you how to prepare for your voyage to adventure, where to stop, what side trips to consider, and what the experts suggest to make your trip both safe and enjoyable. Come with us now for a voyage of a lifetime, traveling the Alaska Highway. During the course of this program, we'll travel the original highway to Fairbanks and then head south on the Parks Highway past Mount McKinley to Anchorage. We'll follow the Glen Highway east, back to the Alaska Highway, and then turn south down to the scenic Cassiar Highway. Our voyage begins here in the city of Dawson Creek, British Columbia, named for George Mercer Dawson, who surveyed this area in 1879. Dawson Creek was once a sleepy frontier community. But that all changed when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. When Japan's forces landed on the Aleutian Islands in June of 1942, the U.S. military feared that if they couldn't be stopped, an attempt would be made to conquer the entire West Coast. Luckily, a northern defense strategy that focused on Alaska was already underway. In addition to placing Army bases in the Alaskan interior, a key element in this defense strategy was a road linking the U.S., the Western Canadian Territories, and the Territory of Alaska. This would be the most reasonable way of getting tons and tons of supplies north. In April of 1942, 7 regiments totaling 11,000 U.S. soldiers had begun punching a road through lingering winter snowdrifts. Surveyors encountered forested areas so thick with underbrush that it could take them hours to walk a mile. Strategically, the road was designed and built in 5 sections, with construction hubs in Dawson Creek, Whitehorse, Fairbanks, and the Alaskan port city of Valdez. When it came to the actual construction of what was first called the Alaska-Canada Highway, time was of the essence. The road was pushed forward as rapidly as possible. Today, environmentalists would protest such an assault on the wilderness. But with the threat of a Japanese invasion being a very real danger, speed of construction was considered more important than any environmental concerns. In some areas, bulldozers and steam shovels would only penetrate a few feet before hitting permafrost. The problem wasn't so much that the ground was frozen, but that it wouldn't stay that way. When permafrost is exposed to the sun, it melts, becoming a hopeless muck, and a potential danger to anything that moves on 2 feet, 4 legs, or any number of wheels. Then there were the working conditions. While it often hovered at 50 below zero for weeks during the winter, the temperature along the Alaska Highway route could rise to more than 100 degrees when summer rolled around. Wild bear and moose could unexpectedly stroll into work sites, and Alaska's famous and fearless mosquitoes, wasps, no-see-ums, and biting flies sometimes descended on the men in clouds. But summer and winter, the work continued. The hours were long, rations were short, and equipment was often insufficient against the harsh wilderness conditions. But occasionally there were light moments, mostly when new strange-looking vehicles appeared. Part of the continuous experimenting going on to find ways to speed up construction. For most of the men, working as road crew laborer meant spending 12 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, working on the road. Everyone suffered from the effects of primitive housing and army food, the heat of summer, and the frigid storms of winter. A few men perished from exposure and exhaustion. But like workers who had come north to build the Trans-Alaska Pipeline 30 years later, steady pay and high adventure compensated most for the hardships they endured. With $1 a day in wages, plus the free, even if limited, room and board, the pay seemed good for those who had previously been idled by America's Great Depression. Amazingly, after only 8 months, the first trail was through, and on November 20th, 1942, a road completion ceremony was held, opening this vital transportation link. With military and civilian contingents present, Alaska's congressional representative Bob Bartlett and Canadian Minister Ian McKenzie held a ribbon-cutting ceremony, and a flood of military transport vehicles began moving supplies north. Although it was officially open, work on the Alaska-Canada Highway, now named the Alcan, had just begun. It was a frontier road, barely passable. A narrow dirt trail that was often so muddy it could only be used by military-grade vehicles most of the year. To be useful over the long term, it had to be upgraded to an all-weather, all-season road. Thus, work continued. American and Canadian crews carried on, straightening curves, lowering grades, and improving surfaces, efforts that are still continuing. Today's Alaska Highway is quite a bit different than that wartime frontier road, but it's still not a route for the careless or uninformed traveler. If you're planning on driving the highway, a travel guidebook such as the Alaska Milepost is one of the best ways to prepare for your trip. It should go without being said that having your vehicle examined thoroughly before starting north is vital. Have your favorite service station carefully check the engine, transmission, drivetrain, belts, oil level, filters, and tires. Since major sections of the highway are gravel, screen your radiator, headlights, and gas tanks. Above all, allow yourself plenty of time. There's a lot to see along the way, so be sure to take the time to enjoy this marvelous adventure. Our journey begins at Dawson Creek, British Columbia, milepost 0 of the Alaska Highway. No longer the remote frontier settlement it was when construction started, Dawson Creek today is an oasis for the motor traveler. Be sure to fuel up here, and if you're traveling in a self-contained vehicle, top off your propane tanks. You never know what lies on the road ahead, and you may need the extra few gallons. The highway north from Dawson Creek runs through farm country and across the Peace River. 50 miles north of Dawson Creek is the energy capital of British Columbia, Fort St. John. Like a modern totem pole, an oil derrick stands as a reminder of the importance played by the oil and gas industry in this northern region. While the Alaska Highway technically begins in Dawson Creek, the adventures of open wilderness actually begin north of Fort St. John. Here, the highway runs toward the northwest through snow-capped mountains that make up the northern section of the Rocky Mountain Range. The evolution of the Alcan from a winding frontier dirt road to a modern highway is illustrated early on. Crossing the Sakani River, one of the early bridges used by the World War II construction crews, is off to the left. While traveling the Alaska Highway, it's easy to make new friends. But also keep in mind that not everyone is a patient traveler, or maybe as courteous as you are. A raised hood or a flat tire can signal the need for a helping hand, or just some moral support. Clyde Tom, a traveler from California, experienced his first flat tire after more than 3,000 miles of Alaska Highway driving.
So far, it's been fine. The horror stories that we've heard have not been true. It's been to a few places where there's road construction going on, but most of the time it's been great. The facilities have been adequate. There's a great difference between places. Sometimes you come up with a place that's very, very clean and neat and orderly, and then you come up to a place that's kind of dumpy. You don't need to carry 20, 30 gallons of gas on the top of your car, and you don't need to carry 2 or 3 tires. It just is a fairly nice road, and it just takes a long time. This is the first flat tire I've had in 6 years of driving this truck. and it's the first one on the road.
Despite its rough reputation, the Alaska Highway is quite hospitable to those who come prepared. Tim Sheldon has been guiding travel groups along the highway for many years.
I was originally from Missouri and went to Alaska in the Army in 1950. And we've been back and forth ever since and in and out. And to an Alaskan, when you go out, you go outside, you go somewhere else, Alaska being the center. It's great now. It was great then for those with a spirit of adventure. It was 1,500 miles of gravel, and now it's, except for construction, it's all paved. It's getting shorter every year as they take out the curves and fill in the low spots and cut down the high spots. I'd rather drive this than the Los Angeles freeways. I'd rather drive this than Chicago or Cleveland during the rush hour. It's just great.
The northernmost outpost in British Columbia is Fort Nelson, a small community by most standards. It nevertheless offers full rest and automotive services to the traveler. Fort Nelson is in Slavey Indian country and surrounded by 3 rivers, the Nelson, Prophet, and Muskwa. Fort Nelson is also the lowest point in elevation along the Alaska Highway and the gateway to the northern Rockies. For the next 100 miles, the twisting climbing road takes you toward Summit Pass, past many stunning vistas like Steamboat Mountain, so named because of its resemblance to a steamboat. Even though there's much to see out on the horizon, be sure to stay alert. There are frequent breaks in the pavement, many of them caused by ice heaves during the winter, and some parts of the highway have narrow shoulders. During the summer, road construction crews are at work removing sharp curves and widening the narrow road. Patience and reduced speeds are a must. An added attraction when you drive slowly is the opportunity to catch wildlife in its natural environment. Here, a young caribou ventures out onto the road. While it may be tempting to shoo this youngster off the roadway, a more patient traveler might be rewarded by an unexpected encounter. As you wind through this northernmost section of the Rocky Mountain Range, take a moment to enjoy a bit of the frontier life offered here. Many people live year-round in the log homes and lodges you see along the way. Most of these year-round residents like the isolation that winter brings, but look forward to the summer season, when many of them make their entire year's income.
Hi, I'd like to buy a loaf of your famous homemade bread.
And what would you like?
Sourdough, please.
You'd like a sourdough?
Yep.
Dark or light?
Light, please.
Okay. There you go.
At milepost 373 is the highest point on the Alaska Highway, Summit Lake Park. At 4,250 feet above sea level, this rest stop provides you with a stunning view of Mount St. George in the Stone Mountain Range. There's an excellent turnout for camping here, but be advised that the area is known for its sudden and dramatic weather changes. If you go hiking, be prepared and carry some rain gear. Frequent wildlife visitors in this area are the stone sheep. Often they can be seen from the roadway, so keep a camera ready. Wary of humans, but not easily spooked, these sheep are perfectly at home, jumping over rocks and ledges and running along outcroppings that few humans would traverse without ropes and pitons. These are some of nature's most talented mountaineers. From Summit Lake, the Alaska Highway begins its long descent into the McDonald River Valley. Here, stunning wilderness vistas greet you at every bend in the roadway. Another major recreational area is Muncho Lake Park, 63 miles from Summit Lake. This lake owes its color to copper, leaching into the water from the Sentinel Mountain Range to the east and the Terminal Mountain Range to the west. The lake is 7 miles long and a mile wide and offers dolly varden and grayling fishing. There have even been some 50-pound lake trout pulled out of these waters. Laird Hot Springs is a real hot spot for camping. A short walk over a marsh, past the occasional foraging moose, brings you to twin pools of 109-degree water, where one can soak the miles out of a weary body and soul. Laird Hot Springs also has 2 bathhouses and a system of walkways, ramps, and stairs that make the entire area accessible to visitors of all ages. Keep your eyes open for unusual plant life. Because of the hot temperatures associated with the springs, there are even 14 species of orchids that grow here, plants more commonly associated with Hawaii or subtropical environments. Because of the popularity of Laird Hot Springs, try to arrive early in the day. By afternoon, you could find it quite crowded and a campsite difficult to find. For the next 135 miles from Laird Hot Springs to Watson Lake, keep a sharp eye on the roadway. Rapidly changing weather is typical of mountainous regions. Remember to drive defensively and keep your headlights on at all times. Watson Lake is the gateway to the Yukon. It's also the last full-service stop on the Alaska Highway for 300 miles. Watson Lake contains one of the most interesting forests anywhere in the world, a sign forest. The first sign was posted on this spot in 1942, and that started it all off. Since then, people from all over the world have been posting signs here. There's no limit to their variety and origins. Travelers are encouraged to bring one of their own and install it in the only expanding sign forest known on Earth. For the next 200 miles, the highway roughly follows the 50th parallel, the border between British Columbia and the Yukon Territory. Depending on your timetable, you may want to head west toward the gold rush town of Skagway, Alaska. At the head of the legendary Lynn Canal, Skagway ended the Inside Passage sea route that Klondike gold stampeders took in 1898. Going overland to Skagway, travelers passed through the village of Carcross. Originally a Tagish Indian hunting camp, it was renamed Caribou Crossing by gold rushers who stampeded through the village. The Caribou Hotel, opened in 1898, is the oldest operating hotel in the Yukon. The road to Skagway, known as Klondike 2, has frequent ore truck traffic, so keep a sharp eye on the roadway. Entering Skagway is like stepping back in time to the gold rush of 1898. The buildings you see here are original to that era. The city of Skagway is an historical district, and all of the structures are kept as authentic as technically possible. Skagway, incidentally, is a Tlingit Indian name that translates as Home of the North Wind. And if you stay in Skagway a few days, you'll learn just how accurate that term is. The gold miners called Skagway the gateway to the golden interior because over 100,000 men and more than a few women passed through this city on their way to the Klondike gold strike in Dawson. At one time, Skagway had a population of 20,000, And there was so much crime that one stampeder noted it was little better than hell on earth. Today, there are less than 1,000 residents in town. But every summer night, the Gateway City Players recreate the exploits of Skagway's most infamous citizen, Soapy Smith, and his gang of ruthless outlaws. Soapy earned his name by playing a game of bait and switch with wrapped bars of soap. You couldn't really call it a gambling game because nobody ever won. Except Soapy, that is. Another great adventure is a ride on the White Pass and Yukon Railroad, one of the last narrow-gauge railways in the world. This is a breathtaking trip, winding back and forth up the White Pass, one of the two routes from Skagway to the gold fields in Canada. Keep in mind that Skagway is an Alaskan town, and you'll have to pass through customs. For most travelers, this is just a formality, but keep in mind that laws in the United States and Canada are different. Handguns are illegal in Canada, and they will be confiscated at the border. Back on the Alaska Highway, our trip veers northwest to Whitehorse, the Yukon's largest city. At milepost 918, Whitehorse is at the hub of roadways that fan out across the Yukon Territory. Whitehorse was founded in 1900 when the White Pass and Yukon Railroad made this its northern terminus. It's also on the Yukon River at the foot of a series of rapids so frothy that early stampeders compared them to the flowing manes of a horse. If you wish to see more of the local area, consider riding one of the river's tour boats for a lunch or dinner cruise. It's easy to be swept back to another time, as if you were traveling the stern wheelers that once plied these waters, filled to the top with stampeders racing north to Dawson. "100 miles further north is Haines Junction. Originally founded as a military camp in 1942, it has since grown to become a small town of more than 500. And 150 miles further south is Haines, once again in Alaska and on the Lynn Canal, about 20 saltwater miles from Skagway. After heading north out of Haines, our journey takes us into Kluane country. Kluane means big fish. The lake is huge in size, which may account for the large fish it contains. But there's only one campground on its shores and a limited number of hiking trails. The lake itself is part of Kluane National Park, which has extensive ice fields and stunning views of wild areas and snow-capped mountains. While most of the park is virtually undeveloped, there is an interpretive center providing information and pictures of the plants and wildlife in the park. As you continue north from Haines Junction, the roadway is notoriously bad. The boggy ground shifts and heaves during the winter, which causes the road to buckle and crack during spring breakup. Along this stretch of road, expect to encounter construction traffic, detours, and sections of roadway covered with gravel. Take your time. The scenery is worth slowing down for anyway. At milepost 1189, you officially enter the 49th state of the United States, Alaska. A monument and a 20-foot wide cut through the forest marks the actual line. Because it's paved, the highway is generally considered a bit better on the Alaskan section, and even this is being constantly improved. But don't increase your speed or reduce your attentiveness too much. You're still only driving along a thin ribbon of civilization surrounded by wilderness. Sudden storms are not uncommon, even during the summer, and wildlife can suddenly dart across the roadway. Among the more intrepid Alaska highway travelers are bicyclers. Seen alone or in small groups, these hardy souls have a view of the highway that is unique to their mode of travel.
We average 60 miles a day and don't go very fast, so we don't spook any wildlife, and therefore we get a chance to see a lot of them. You can get a little too close to wildlife, as 3 of us were chased by about 100 yards by an angry grizzly and 3 grown cubs. So yeah, that's that's getting a little close to the action. We've been on the road now for about 8-9 weeks, and about 3/4 of the days have been rainy. So don't let that discourage you. And it's the miles you go in a day, and the speed you go is definitely worth the scenery. Many RVers go into information centers, speeding as fast as they can. The first thing they say is, "Where's the wildlife?" Well, they zoom right by it, and on a bicycle, you don't do that. You can see everything. It's fabulous.
At milepost 1314 is Tok, named long ago for a river and nearby Indian village. This spot is at a crossroads of the Alaska Highway and the Tok Cutoff, which is commonly called the Glen Highway. Tok is the first sizable community on the American side of the border, and from here the Alaska Highway heads north through the Tanana River Valley to Fairbanks. The next sizable community between Tok and Fairbanks is Big Delta, milepost 1422. Taking its name from the nearby Delta River, this community was founded out of a highway construction camp in 1919. In Big Delta, there's an historical marker commemorating the terminus of the original Alaska Highway construction project, and a visitor center which has exhibits and information on the history and construction of the highway. Finally, 1,475 miles north of Dawson Creek, the Alaska Highway comes to an official end in Fairbanks. Today, Fairbanks is home for almost 70,000 people. It has the amenities of a city 3 or 4 times its size. Fairbanks was established in 1901 when a riverboat captain became so enraged with a merchant passenger that he threw him ashore with all his stores and goods. Our next stop is Denali National Park and Preserve, the crown jewel of America's park system. Originally, the area was known as Mount McKinley National Park, but the name has been changed to Denali, acknowledging the Tanana Indian word for the magnificent mountain, Denali, meaning the Great One. Visiting Denali is a spectacular experience, but requires spending at least a day to get deep into the park. Travel on the park's only road is restricted, so it is recommended you find the ranger station and inquire about bus transportation. It's a 65-mile trip into the heart of this wonderful park, giving sightseers and visitors plenty of time to take pictures. The nomads of the north, the wild caribou, wander here freely. In higher country, keep a sharp eye and a telephoto lens ready for Dahl sheep. They cling to the rocky crags of the high ground, far from predators, and feed on the sparse alpine vegetation. You may also see a reclusive grizzly bear across the hills. Its summer pattern is a constant search for sweet berries, ground squirrels and mice, salmon and carrion. In many parts of the park, moose are abundant and often graze slowly along the foothills. The mountain itself has two names. On most United States maps, it's Mount McKinley, named in honor of the presidential nominee of 1896, William McKinley of Ohio. But according to the State of Alaska Geographic Names Board, the mountain's name is Denali. Either way, it's the highest mountain in North America, towering 20,320 feet in height. Half a day's drive south of Denali National Park is Anchorage, the largest city in Alaska. Originally a construction camp during the early building of the Alaska Railroad, which you may have seen on your way south from Fairbanks. The city was founded in the early 1920s. The Anchorage Bowl is like a triangle. On two sides are water, the Knik and Turnagain Arms, and it's backed by the mountains of the Chugach Range. Anchorage has both the busiest private plane airport in the United States, Merrill Field, and the busiest float plane airport in the United States, Lake Hood. Either one of these fields are less than an hour's flight from some of the best hunting and fishing in Alaska. 40 miles south of Anchorage is the most popular tourist spot in Alaska, Portage Glacier. The deep blue icebergs you see in front of the visitor center broke off from a glacier at the far end of the lagoon. Their deep blue color comes from the density of the ice. It's a compaction of tons and tons of snow collected over eons of time and pressed until all of the air is out of the ice. Further south, at the proverbial end of the road, as the people here like to refer to their city, is Homer. Named for a prospector named Homer Pennock, Homer has a spit of land that is as far west as you can drive on any road directly attached to the roads of the lower 48. The Homer Spit is a 5-mile stretch of sand that juts into Kachemak Bay. You can fish from the spit, snap photographs of eagles, or board a ferry for an off-road adventure to several wilderness resorts that dot the shores of Kachemak Bay. After returning to Anchorage, as you're heading south, you may want to follow the Glen Highway to Tok rather than going back through Fairbanks. The Glen Highway winds east through forest and tundra and then heads for towering Mount St. Elias in the Wrangell Mountains. Once you've arrived in Tok, you have a choice. You can travel back south on the Alaska Highway toward Watson Lake, or you can take the dramatic Cassiar Highway. Reminiscent of the Alaska Highway in earlier days, the Cassiar Highway does have sections that are still gravel. Be sure to take these areas slowly for safety's sake. Because the Cassiar Highway skirts coastal mountain ranges of both Alaska and Canada, the views are stunning. But again, as with all mountain driving, the weather is unpredictable, with road conditions often changing every few miles. The Cassiar between Watson Lake and Dawson Creek is also a bit shorter than the Alcan. But since the road isn't improved to the level of the Alaska Highway, it will probably take a few more hours to complete the trip. As Henry and Elda Windsor of Saskatchewan point out, the Cassiar Highway is not nearly as bad as many imagine.
Well, we found it just as good as the Alaska Highway. There was one bad spot up here north of Dease Lake, about 20 kilometers, but that was due to the fact that it rained and they hadn't had a chance, gravel, and they hadn't had a chance to go over it with a grader. But otherwise, we've been happy with the road. And we're on our way home now, and we're glad we're coming home a different way. We're still seeing new things on this road, and there's a lot to see on the Cassiar.
Keep in mind that since the Cassiar Highway is less traveled, this appeals to some truckers. Drive defensively. The narrow road lacks much shoulder area, so only marvel at the scenery when you've pulled your vehicle off the road, not while you're driving. 100 miles south of Watson Lake is the first of many unpaved sections of the highway. Sections of the road are always being upgraded, so expect detours and slow going in some places. Because of the terrain, you may want to fill your gas tank more frequently. Though the longest section of the road with no amenities is 97 miles, during the off-season, some of the service facilities may be closed. Play it safe. When your tank starts to get below half full, top it off. You don't have to worry about campsites on the Cassiar, however. Frequently spaced along the route, you can easily make it from one campground to the next during the day. If you happen to be looking for a more civilized way to spend the night, or savor food cooked in a kitchen rather than on a Coleman stove, there are plenty of rest stops and small restaurants along the route. Bear Paw Ranch, located near Iskut, for instance, is an excellent example of the rustic yet comfortable stopovers along the Cassiar Highway. Owner Tony Kurtz keeps the ranch open year-round, providing information, stories, tales of his experiences, and hot food.
Well, they call this place the Bear Paw Ranch. When I moved here, there was a bear and myself. We shared this place. He scratched a tree, I scratched a tree. He came back, scratched it higher. I took an axe and scratched it higher. He moved out, I'm still here. So we're still the Bear Paw Ranch. He left his tracks behind. Well, I think the Cassiar Highway is kind of newer, and it has more scenery than the Alaska Highway. Like, you get all those coastal mountain ranges with those alpine meadows, glaciers, and every 30 miles it almost seems to change, even climate-wise. You know, it's warmer here, it's more snow on the other end than you have on the further north and whatnot. And that's basically what it really is. You know, I think most people prefer that highway for one thing, that it's shorter and it's more scenic. Way more mountainous and compared to the Alaska Highway. So a lot of people say, well, I heard it's just a straight gravel road and your windshield gonna be smashed out and you're gonna have 4 flat tires, which doesn't happen anymore. It's actually a pretty nice road. And they're fixing it up every year. Like next year, they're gonna do some more seal coating. And most of it is seal coated now or paved all the way up there to the border.
At Tataga Lake, the longest stretch of gravel road begins. 150 miles in length with only a few sections of pavement.
Yeah,
what's going on up here?
They're widening and they're taking out some of the... Okay. And they're taking out some of the corners in the hills, and then they're getting it ready, and next year when they come back, they'll be paving.
Okay, how long stretch?
14 kilometers.
Oh boy, okay. Thanks very much.
Have a good trip.
A popular side trip off the Cassiar Highway is to the Canadian town of Stewart and the Alaskan community of Hyder. Hyder was originally called Portland City because of its location on the Portland Canal. But the community was eventually named for Frederick Hyder, a Canadian mining engineer. Also of note for trivia buffs, Stewart is Canada's most northerly ice-free port, and Hyder is Alaska's southernmost town with highway access to the lower 48. As you travel this section of the Cassiar Highway, keep your eye out for hanging glaciers. These glaciers, sometimes called alpine glaciers, are actually fields of ice that exist in the mountains. When they calve, they start avalanches of ice. If you love to fish, the rivers and streams along the Cassiar teem with fish. Be sure to check with Canadian authorities about the fishing regulations and bring along a frying pan. There's nothing better than a freshly caught and cooked trout or grayling. There are also many four-legged fishermen in these parts, so be cautious and be sure to keep your camera handy. Continuing south to the end of the Cassiar Highway and the end of our voyage of discovery and adventure, the highway will pass the small Indian village of Kitwanku. This was originally called Gitano, the place of many people, but after raids by other warring Indians in the vicinity, it was renamed to Kitwanku, place of reduced numbers. Today, Kitwanku is known for its collection of restored totem poles, including the well-known Holes in the Ice totem. Well, this ends our tour of the Alaska Highway and the associated roadways linking Alaska and Canada to the lower 48. We've gone as far north and west as we can drive from the lower 48 and seen a remarkable portion of this great 49th state. Exploring this vast wilderness offers many rewards. Hopefully, like the earliest explorers, your travels too have been rewarding, and your memories remain full of the ruggedness and natural splendor of this beautiful northern land.